Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm recording a video right now to bring up a couple of questions that I have as a comics creator, and I would love feedback from anyone who's read my stuff. Specifically, I'm going to be asking about the Mary Sue series. Unfortunately, the questions are going to involve, well, to get deep into the questions, I'm going to have to talk about spoilers. So, if you don't want to hear spoilers, this may be a time to not listen to the video. At first, I'm going to recap issues 1 and 2 of Mary Sue, specifically the luxury ship pirate incident, and then I'm going to ask about where you guys would like the series to go. Because there's two options. You could sort of, in RPG terms, consider it there's one option that's the main quest, the personal quest of our protagonist, and then there are side quests, which are things that the main character can do, which may not advance her personal story, but are the sort of daily activities that she does in her day job, which I think are also significant to her character and gives flavor to the world and her personality and the world around her, the characters around her. So, I don't know. It's up to your personal spoiler policy. I'm not going to say super spoilers, but I will be talking about some things that if you really like surprises, first I'll be talking about issues 1 and 2, so if you've already read that, don't worry about that. I'll just recap that right now. And then I'll talk about the options that'll happen afterwards, and I'll give one more spoiler warning. So, in issues 1 and 2 of Mary Sue, Rosemary and Dr. Masaka are celebrating his retirement, and the doc's having a great time, talking to ladies, and I'm sure he's, dancing and gambling and eating and having a great time. And Mary herself is sort of struggling to have a good time because of her personality. She's a little derpy and she has a hard time connecting to people. And I'm sure during the series we'll be able to get more in depth as to why she's like that and what she tries to do to not be like that. And so she knows a guy on the ship who's a janitor. His name is Songbird, and he's one of the only people on the ship who seems to be nice to her. And they develop a sort of amorous relationship, a little bit of flirting, and he invites her to the ball one evening, and she's very excited, of course. She has a crush on him, and she gets, dressed, and she looks lovely, and she goes down and meets him, and they have a nice romantic walk on a balcony and talk about their lives, their personal lives. And Songbird talks about his life and how he has these siblings that he's trying to support, and he's not making a lot of money. And so he's basically struggling to make ends meet. And he insinuates that he does some things on the side that he's not proud of. So later on in the evening, they go dancing, and of course, Songbird will look up, and he sees something that spooks him, and he tells us, Mary, there's a pirate attack imminent on the ship, and he has to run. And Mary doesn't understand, but he vanishes, and we see pirates, basically doing their pirate thing, robbing people and taking over the ship and all that stuff, and generally causing mischief, stealing jewels and whatever they do. And all of a sudden, Mary comes crashing down in her suit, the hermit crab, and gets into a huge fight, fights the pirates. It's lots of fun. Everyone's having, she's destroying half the ship in the meantime, and she thinks she's saving the ship, and maybe we learn later that's like no one asked her to do that. So that's part of her character, of course. She'll leap into action, but maybe there are consequences to that, right? So anyway, she fights the pirates, and she has one opportunity to to send the finishing blow, a giant laser blast to the final ship that's trying to get away. And she realizes that Songbird is on the ship, and she can't fire. And the bad guys get away with lots of booty. And she's disappointed in herself, and the story ends with Dr. Masaka kind of chewing her out, saying, "Why did you get involved? You've done a bazillion dollars worth of damage. No one asked you to do this." And she says, "I'll make this right." And she's very visibly upset. And so the story ends there on a sort of cliffhanger. She says, "I'm going to fix this, basically. The bad guys got away, and I'm going to make this right." Now, my question to the readers, if you guys want to, feel free to say in the comments what you think, what you would prefer to see in the next few issues, let's say. That's the big question for me. I have a poll on Twitter right now, which I'll link to below, that you can vote for if you would like the main story quest, which I'll explain in a little bit, to continue, or if you want Mary to go on a side quest. So chronologically speaking, this is not spoiler territory yet. Excuse me. This is not a spoiler yet. Her day job would require her to go somewhere else and not pursue the pirates. So that is what you would call a side quest. She goes to an island called Thalassania and does a side job that has nothing to do with the pirates. It's just something that it's an enclosed 2-issue story where she does a certain task, and I can talk about it. I'll pitch it. Or I can shelve that story for another time, and we can, if the readers want, go to the point in the story where, because this can happen sort of not chronologically, it doesn't really matter. She goes directly after the pirates, following a lead. Her only lead right now is an email address that Songbird gave her. So we're now going to be exiting the non-spoiler area. If you have read the first 2 issues and you have a feeling about that, please vote, because I will be basing my decision based on the vote. Again, link below. Now, if you don't mind spoilers, if you want a little more information to make your decision, I'm going to be talking about loosely what's going to happen next in the main quest and what would happen in the side quest. So this is your last warning. I will be spoiling some details, not major details, but as a sort of writer's circle kind of thing, I want everyone to understand why it's so hard, and why this will in fact explain why I canceled the previous Kickstarter. So I'm going to get into details about that, if you guys don't mind. As a creator, I just want to get my thoughts down, and I just want to be transparent with all of you, and this is why I'm struggling with this story right now. Alright? So last spoiler warning, and I'm going to explain the main story quest right now, a little bit. So Mary's only clue right now, a little bit of detective work, is that she has a email address. So she's going to contact someone who she knows, who's a detective, who can track down this email address. But the problem is, he will not tell her the location of this guy or what he's learned over the phone, because he says, "I have to show you in person." So Mary has to travel to a place called The Funnel, which I'll be putting an image up. I've written all these stories out. I've thumbnailed them. They're ready to be drawn, both of these stories. She goes to The Funnel, and we're going to follow her quest as she uncovers, based on this email address alone. She will go and meet important people who will lead her to more and more clues as to not only how to find these pirates through Songbird, but we're going to be learning about who Songbird is, how he got to where he is, why he's doing what he's doing. Because it's very important to me as a storyteller. I want the story to be written in such a way that when and if there's a final confrontation with him, the stakes need to be super, super high, because I don't think a good story is Mary punches a guy. Mary punches her way to victory. She blows everything up, and the day is saved. I don't think that's interesting in any story, especially American comics, is a massive chip on my shoulder. There have to be stakes, and I think there have to be worthwhile choices that Mary has to make. Now, I'm not going to say what exactly the choices are going to be. If there's just 2 or 3 choices, I'm not going to say how many choices there are. But in order for the ultimate payoff of this whole pirate story arc to be worth it, there has to be a lot of build-up. A lot. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be cool action in between, because as Mary is investigating, she's going to encounter tough guys, let's say, who have heard about her. Maybe there's a bounty on her, right? They want to collect. She gets attacked by people. She has to defend herself. There's going to be action. But there's also going to be parts of the story, because this whole arc, let's say the pirate arc will wrap up within 10 issues or so, if I'm lucky. That's a lot of time, production time, and that's going to be very expensive. If I'm a customer, that's a hell of an ask, frankly. So the reason I canceled the Kickstarter was because I realized the next 3 books that I was pitching barely moved. How do I put this? It moves the story along in a dramatic way a lot, but barely anything happens in terms of action. So I realize my books are very expensive, and there's a high page count. What I would have been asking for my readers is to trust me to build a story that will have an extremely satisfying payoff at the end. But the costs would be incredibly high, right? So I won't say much more spoilers for that. But let's say 10 issues. Mary's going to learn more about the pirates. There's a lot to learn about them and why they do what they do. She's going to learn more about Songbird. The stakes are going to be super high on a personal level. And then she's going to have to make some really, really tough choices. That's my plan for the pirate arc. And that's going to take a lot of issues. So that's the big problem. Now, the side story, story B, is that she goes to a aquatic cluster. It's sort of a bunch of oceans that are floating in space that have merged together in a sort of supercontinent of oceans. And there are underwater people who live there, called the Psari, which is the Greek word for fish. And it's, basically mermaid people, undersea adventures, that sort of thing. She meets somebody. So now this is a completely separate story, side story, 2 issues, which I might be pitching, depending. It's a self-contained story where she lands on this continent of water, Thalassania, meets someone who's going to be giving her a sort of payment. And this is what her everyday job is like as a contractor. So she's going to meet someone who will ask her to do something for them, and she will receive payment, and then everyone's happy. She goes about her business, moves on to her other personal business. So what will happen in Thalassania, and without too many spoilers, this is more of a taste preview, is that she thinks that she's sent there to slay a monster that's plaguing a town of underwater people. But actually, it seems that those people already know who Dr. Masaka is, and in fact revere him as a sort of prophet. He's been there before, 30 years ago, before Mary was born, and the timing of that is intentional. And they revere Dr. Masaka because he boosted their society, the Psari people. They used to be sort of unadvanced, culturally, technologically, all that stuff. Then the humans, the anthropes, arrived from beyond the stars. and brought all this technology with them. And the miracle thing that it turns out the Psari can do is that their biology is such that they have extreme healing properties if applied to humans. I say anthropy. That's what they're called in this story, in the Mary Sue story. Anthropy are humans. So in exchange for these fluids, which would be used for medical reasons, Masaka gave them all this technology and all this stuff that they enjoy, and really evolved their culture thousands of years, because they were sort of hunter-gatherer types in the ocean. So, not to say too much more, but Mary thinks that she's just there to fight a monster, but it turns out that there's a lot more going on societally for them, and her showing up is something that is long overdue, that the people require more of her than she realized she would need to give. All right? So that's the taste of what that story is. It's going to be 76 pages. I've planned it all out. I've thumbnailed everything. It's lots of fun to read. It'll take probably 2 months to paint, 3 months. Let's be a little more generous. And yeah, it's a self-enclosed story. It has an ending. At the end of the story, things sort of go back to normal, but Mary learns some important things about herself, and I mean, I'm not going to say she blows up at the end. She's going to survive. But hashtag spoilers. But important things happen during this story for her personally. And it advances her character and her history and the lore of the universe and the story and the characters around her. And it's just a fun story where she shows off more of her suits. Because part of the thing of any story, side story or main story, is that she's going to use a different suit. She has 12 that we know about. And she's going to show off new features of each new suit as we continue the story. So this is a series that really is planned to go on at my current rate. Like, there's no way I can finish within my lifetime, but it could go on for a very long time. So, knowing what I've told you guys now, the question remains, do you, as readers, want to continue the pirate storyline? Or do we want to take some time to do just an enclosed story on the side, where it's like, you can read these 2 issues in isolation and just enjoy them, and you'll learn a lot about Mary and have a great time reading them. And then the rest of the series will always be waiting. Because the big question for me is, I don't know if I, George, have enough of an audience yet in terms of indie readers. I don't know if I have enough of an audience to fund. I don't mean to. I hope this doesn't sound wrong. I don't think I can afford to do a long series where it could go for like 3-4 issues without any fighting, right? If you guys are reading this story, and I'm asking for premium prices because, again, these books are really expensive to produce. Not just printing costs, but like I have to draw them full time, right? So those costs really snowball, unfortunately. Can I afford to go 3 issues without a fight? Some people have suggested that I could do like the flashback thing where like you start a story in the middle of a fight, and then it's like, oh, let's rewind the story. How did we get here? I don't personally like telling stories that way. I don't know. I think it's confusing. It's cheap. It makes a mess of really I like a nice chronological sequence of events. So, in the case of the main story quest, she goes to the funnel. She might get attacked by a tough guy, fights him off. That would be about 3 or 4 issues in. And then she has to leave the funnel and follow the trail of breadcrumbs to chase down Songbird and find out what's going on. That'll be the main story quest. So I think I've spoken long enough here. I'm currently planning... I'm putting together a draft for the next campaign. And there's a lot of challenges with that, but the biggest challenge is just deciding what you guys want to read next. Because I have all these stories written out, and I want to make sure everyone's satisfied with what they read. I can control things like book quality, art quality, but the things that I would be interested in reading may not necessarily line up with what you guys want to read. I have different tastes than other people, and it's just a question of how can I make the most amount of people happy. You can't please everyone, but I want to try to please as many people as possible, and I want return customers. I want you guys to read this story and crave more. And not in a cheap way with, cliffhangers, but I want you to keep reading and being interested in the story. The ultimate goal for me is to get so many readers that I can lower the prices of the books someday. Because the more books you sell, the cheaper they are to produce. And of course, back issues can eventually be cheaper because I'll collect them in trade paperbacks, that sort of thing. Right now, they're just single issues. So that's that. That's all I'm going to say for now. I've been talking long enough. Thanks for listening. Again, the poll will be linked below. I value all of your advice. I can't guarantee that I'm going to listen to all the advice because a lot of the times it's very conflicting, and frankly, sometimes the advice is kind of a bitter pill to swallow sometimes. So I'm only one person. I can only handle so much. But anyway, I really want to do this full time, and I want to make you guys happy with the books. So let me know what you want. Let me know what you think, and I will do my best to accommodate. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.